Final Fantasy games may not release on Xbox consoles this generation. Square Enix is quote-unquote keen to keep releasing every game on PC. And let's go ahead and file this under rumor, and let's go ahead and discuss. Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian if you're new around here, but if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, you smashing magnificent legend. That's what you get for subscribing, by the way. Free compliments at the start of these videos. While I'm going to include a link in the description, you should absolutely do what you're supposed to do and go and click on it for this article. We're going to do a deep dive into the article itself. I'm going to give you kind of my thoughts piece by piece. There's a lot in here to really unpack, but ultimately for the TLDR, for those out there who just really are interested in my opinion, especially if this ends up being true, this is ultimately a disappointment. Just based off of kind of my gaming philosophy, I feel like gamers should be able to play wherever they want, and thus I can understand timed exclusives. I can get behind that as an argument, and I think that's ultimately where we'll see the industry land. In fact, that's what we see even with first-party games from Sony. But I think and believe in gamer choice and gamer freedom first and foremost. That is just who I am, and so I tend to get the wrath of any kind of fanboy on both sides of the aisle. So Sony fanboys hate me, Xbox fanboys hate me, and Nintendo fanboys hate me. Like, that is who I am, and I'm going to continue to advocate for a better gaming environment for everyone. But we're going to talk about this impact as it relates to Final Fantasy 14 potential impact. What of Final Fantasy Origins going to go kill chaos? The article makes reference to a lot of this, and that's why I do want to spend some time deep diving it. But ultimately, I just have a question. If this is true, I just would love to know. I'll never know. We'll never really know. But what did it cost Sony to keep Final Fantasy off of Xbox, and specifically Final Fantasy? So what's really interesting in a way is this isn't Sony saying, hey, we're just going to buy Square Enix, right? Like if they just went out and purchased Square Enix and made Square Enix a first party Sony, publisher, like I get that's what Sony does, right? But Square Enix seems adamant on releasing its games on PC regardless. And when it comes to consoles, they seem obviously fine with the, cashing the check for just PlayStation if this proves to be true. But for one franchise only, and everything else seems to be going everywhere else, so to speak. So it's just a interesting business deal, and Sony really wanting to be the home for Final Fantasy. Can't blame them. Final Fantasy 16 being announced for PC and PS5, and no word of Xbox. Final Fantasy 7 Remake having spent over a year's worth of exclusivity on PlayStation. The question is that will we see it ever on Xbox, or is it just going to be off of an entire console for an entire generation? We haven't seen anything like that before. That is a weird timed exclusive. Does that mean at the end of the day, the next box, 300 and whatever they decide to call it, series, alpha, when that drops, does that mean that all of a sudden you start to see Final Fantasy 7R and these games make their way? We got to talk about it. So let's go ahead and dive in the article and let's explore this together. All right, so kicking this off right, Final Fantasy games may not release on consoles this generation as Sony wants PlayStation to be the home for the series. Speaking with the Resetera Forums, VGC's Jordan Miller commented on the Japanese publisher's future games, saying that most of them will end up on Xbox, but not Final Fantasy games. He likely refers to the future major entries of the series as Stranger Paradise Final Fantasy Origins is also being released on Xbox Series X and S and Xbox One here in just the next couple of months. Most of Square's stuff will end up on Xbox, but I wouldn't hold out hope for Final Fantasy unless something changes. Sony wants PlayStation to be the home of Final Fantasy this gen. Final Fantasy VII was supposed to be on Xbox by now, but obviously here we are. So apparently Square Enix is in Sony's camp beyond what is publicly known, with multiple timed exclusives in the work, and additionally, the first announcements will be coming before long. This is interesting because as we see Ubisoft actually partnering up with Xbox more and Square Enix firmly in Sony's camp, this is obviously what's beyond publicly known. It's a cool move, but I wonder what the price would be for looking at this Ultimate plus Ubisoft. This is turning out to actually being very exciting this gen, is what this article is referencing. For me, personally speaking, I don't necessarily like it, but you know what? We've been gamers this whole time. We've been dealing with ridiculousness this whole time, so I guess I'll make do. Jordan Miller also commented that Square Enix's games coming to PC, saying that the publisher is keen on keeping the releasing of every game on PC, even if the ports aren't great. This is something that has plagued Square Enix games for quite a while when it comes to PC ports. In fact, even with Final Fantasy VII are on the Epic Game Store as a part of I'm assuming a timed exclusive. I've been hearing lots of rumors and reports and issues with that version of the game itself. And honestly, if I find some free time here in the next couple months, hopefully I'll be able to make it and jump into it. I'm very much looking forward to it. Or do I wait and see if it actually comes out to Steam? Sound off in the comments and let me know, guys, what I should do there. And with this time exclusives, they're only going to continue. So it seems like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Stranger in Paradise Final Fantasy Origin won't be the last games from the publisher to release on the Epic Game Store first. So while we continue on, while Square Enix is keen on continuing releasing all their games on PC, it's definitely a good thing. The fact that they are willing to, even with the ports aren't great, doesn't sound good at all. Totally agree with this mindset. I wish they would take more time on that. However, the fact that they're keen and they want to keep making sure that those games come to console, in this case PlayStation and PC for the time being, does say, I think, that they see a huge PC market, and maybe the value isn't there in terms of Xbox or what Xbox is willing to offer. At the end of the day, we're going to have to, only time will tell if this ends up being kind of a true statement or not, but we'll find out hopefully here in the next couple months regardless. Obviously, this is very disappointing, but it's unfortunately clear that no major effort has been made on the ultimate version of the game regarding the Epic Game Store and PC release. Sure, you can actually play at a higher frame rate, but if you have hardware for it, the PS5 can actually choose between 4K and 30 mode or a performance mode that drops the resolution but keeps it at 60 frames per second. On PC, the top of the line rig can easily play this game locked at 4K at 120 frames per second target. That said, such a high profile release warranted something more. Looking back, Square Enix itself demonstrated that what it meant a few years ago with Final Fantasy 15 Windows Edition. Game director Tabata eloquently said that it was well ahead of the console versions, explaining how the partnership with Nvidia had allowed the studio to release its version on PC. So as this develops and as we learn more, I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date. But again, go check out this article for yourself and weigh in on that too. So when it comes down to it, obviously the article makes no reference to Final Fantasy XIV, but it does use a Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers image. And so we're often asked, is this game coming to Xbox? In which both Yoshi P and Phil Spencer have said very positive things, but there is the chance that Sony doesn't want that to happen. Now, obviously Final Fantasy XIV having its surge, having its server issues, so much more is needed in terms of like, hey, before they even open up the game for sale. At the time of this recording, it's not on sale right now because they can't support the players who actively want to come in and start playing this game, and nor would that actually be the best experience for them to do that right now. So ultimately, when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, I hope we hear something this year, but if they continue, if Sony's like, you know what, no, we just want to keep Final Fantasy XIV locked down to PlayStation, I think it's a smart move on their part if PlayStation's the only place to play brand new Final Fantasy games, or the most popular Final Fantasy games, or in the case of Endwalker, perhaps the best Final Fantasy games. You guys can let me know. I definitely am leaning that direction for sure. But at its core, I hope that that's not the case, especially the multiplayer component. I can get behind a timed exclusive. I can understand a timed exclusive. And the question is how long should a timed exclusive be? I believe a year. If Final Fantasy VII Remake doesn't come to Xbox this year, that would be over 2 years. I think that at that point, you're seeing them just kind of pay for that privilege. And I would have to assume it would be pretty pricey. I'd have to assume that. 14 being a multiplayer game hurts even more, especially if that's the case, because multiplayer games, more than a single player experience, is about getting people playing the game and more. And I would think and argue that Final Fantasy on Xbox would actually bring in even more players than they currently have, which is good for the whole community and the whole game. And that has that reoccurring cost, right? So at some point, that's where we're going to be. Now, at the core of it, I know because we are talking 14 and Xbox in a video, there's going to be people who are going to come in and they're going to spout off things that aren't true, that haven't been true since like 2013 or 14 or 15. A lot of progress has been made. So to all of those, if I get it, but the last statement is that Yoshi P would love to bring this to Xbox. They just don't have the resources in terms of actually like getting it tested and published. And right now with the surge, it doesn't make sense. Maybe that will change, and I hope it does. And as soon as if it does change, I'll be sure to let you guys know, probably with some tears in my eyes and some probably woohooing and things like that. But at this time, as we sit in January 2022, this is some news. This is a bit of concerning news as it relates to Final Fantasy and the shortage of PS5s. If I could get a PS5 and they come out with some kind of Final Fantasy 16 PS5 edition, that might be awesome. But anyway, guys, I want to bring this to you guys, get your thoughts, and we can have that discussion as it relates to Final Fantasy and the future of the console generations. So sound up below. Let me know what you're thinking. Thanks, guys, for being here. Appreciate you. Hopefully you have a fantastic day. Hopefully I'll see you in my next video. But until then, take care.
I just want to say I'm really glad you're feeling better, and I love the videos. Well, I love you too. Michelle? Shoot for the moon, and so even if you fail, you'll reach the stars. Go for the 100K subscribers. Yeah.